Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Well, let it go, but it's always a. I'm just never on.
You're so good.
I'm like, I put. Every single time, and I just.
Yeah, so that's what I do.
Yeah, I kind of like.
Bill, what's his name? Well, he's in the he's making the caucus. That exactly. Oh, well, that's not what it was when I first looked at it. I'm glad that I know. He also changed it. He has an emergency thing there. Yeah, I haven't taken a good. I was just going to sponsor. It's a good sponsor. I have no clue.
Hello, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm calling to order the 19th session of the 53rd Senate, and we will be starting with our Pledge of Allegiance. So all who are willing and able, please stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Colorado State acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native nations and tribes. We recognize the indigenous people as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. CSU is founded as a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and significantly that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose lands this university was built upon. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice, and recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. And now, the swearing in of senators and associates. Is there anyone swearing in today? Great, so we'll start with beginning roll call.
All right, y'all. Thanks. Okay. Hi, y'all. I'm Elisa. I'm filling in for Maddie today. My name sounds like a type of pasta, so I understand the pronunciation is kind of difficult sometimes, and I apologize if I mess up anybody's names. Please correct me after the session. First of all, Speaker Ayala. Here. Speaker Pro Tempore Cordozo. Parliamentarian Doyle.
Here.
Officer Ritter. Chair Bukhari. Chair Kelly.
Here.
Senator Barrett. Senator Cole Johnson. Senator Winston. Senator Tebeb.
Tim.
Present.
Here. Senator Wilson.
Here.
Chair Oslan.
Here.
Here.
Senator Hill. Senator Melchior. Senator Schumer. Senator Chacon. Senator Snyder.
Here.
Chair Taylor.
Here.
Senator Johnson. Chair Trout.
Present.
Senator Davis.
Here.
Chair Frisky.
Here.
Senator Reese.
Here.
Associate Senator Rivera. Senator Veron. Barron. Associate Senator Camberg.
Present.
Senator Lesser. Associate Senator Alvarez. Senator Pickerel. Senator Yankowski, Senator Buckner, Associate Senator Ozer, Associate Senator Leggett,
Here.
Associate Senator Miller,
Here.
Associate Senator Myers, Associate Senator Burge,
Here.
Senator Hazinga, Senator DeMaria, Senator Vaughn, Associate Senator Turner, Associate Senator Morgan, Associate Senator Salazar, Senator Milka, Senator Chansey, Senator Rivera, Associate Senator Bouchara. Thank you.
Great. Now we move on to consent agenda. Is there any dissent? What's your agenda? Can you grab a the closest mic? Thanks.
Motion to remove the ratifications of the elections committee from today's agenda and every agenda therefore.
Second.
Is there any dissent? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the ratification committee. Is there any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we move on to gallery input. If anything, I'd like to introduce some people in the back of the room for us today. One of them so graciously brought us candy, which is sitting in the conference room right now. Thinking if y'all want some extra candy. Right now, sitting in the back, we have Mike Ellis, the director of the LSC. We also have Dr. Blanche, who's Vice President of Student Affairs. And we have Dr. Colleen Cipriani. Which is the Vice President of Inclusive Excellence here. Can we all give them a little round of applause? Appreciate what y'all do, y'all being here. Is there any gallery input? Seeing none, we move on to guest speaker, which is the accessibility report.
Good evening, folks. I hope you're all doing well. For folks who don't know who I am, my name is Sammy Trout. I use the he, use pronouns, and I'm chair of the Accessibility Caucus as well as Associate Center for Student Disability Center.
My name is Madeline Hamburg. I'm involved in the Accessibility Caucus. I'm an Associate Senator for Adult Learners and Veterans on campus.
I'm Alexander Wilson. I'm a senator for the Student Disability Center, and I'm vice chair of the Accessibility Caucus.
So today we'll be presenting the presentation that goes over our fall 2023 report. A couple reasons for doing it. One, if you've taken a look at it, it's a 40-page document. It is a lengthy document. We also plan to expedite later tonight. So in order to have folks know exactly what they're looking at, we allowed it to be on the agenda for 2 or 3-ish weeks now, give or take, something like that. And then we're also doing this presentation just so folks know what they're looking at when they look at the report. So next slide. So just some quick summary highlights. First, we'll be doing an introduction of the caucus, kind of its history. Then we'll be going over data review and our data collection methods. Then we'll go over caucus recommendations and then the conclusion and caucus next steps. So quick introduction. The ASCSU Accessibility Caucus was founded on April 26, 2023 by the passage of Bill 5221. I can't believe it's now Buttons Act, which is an incredible name, for the purpose of investigating and providing a report on the Senate on the status of door button openers here on campus. The mission of the caucus was expanded with the passage of Bill 5306 and did I add in here Bill 5314 respectively. 5306 extended it to be expiration date until December, as well as expanding the mission scope. And then Bill 5314 established it as a permanent fixture pursuant to the caucus rules within our Constitution. I need to switch on my computer. Since the caucus started in April, it has grown from a modest group of 5 to a robust coalition of 20 individuals, and that has actually expanded to 22 since we have had more members of the executive branch join us, which I'm very excited to see more engagement there. What makes this expansion even more noteworthy is that over a fourth of the caucus's current membership are not officials within ASCSU. So they don't serve on any of the branches. They don't serve on any of the boards that ASCSU has. They're just students who are really passionate about accessibility and disability issues here on campus. And additionally, it also has members, both undergrad and graduate students. So we're getting a lot of representation on that front as well. With students each from their own different backgrounds in terms of advocating for students here on campus to make this campus more inclusive. And I'll hand it off to data review.
Yeah. Okay. So like this slide says, we are not experts in data collection or research. We even still have quite a bit of work ahead of us as far as finishing and compiling all this data. We'd like to try to have all that done by the end of the school year, which is part of why we need y'all's help. So we started collecting data on buttons on campus. We have several data points that are asked, not just the building, were the buttons working inconsistently, not working at all. If we could get pictures of which doors they were, a description, etc. We also had self-reporting. So students could, outside of our group, we could have students reporting button outages. There is a big chunk of buildings on campus that we already have facilities either working on or that they have on their agenda. So I think we can go to the next slide. So we went over 11 different buildings. So that's not just buttons of entrances, that's buttons to bathrooms. If there's like a foyer to an elevator, elevators are another important aspect that we have not even begun to tackle. Let's see, parking garages. Yeah, so we were able to get through 11 buildings, which is amazing because a lot of our membership includes students who have disabilities. So it's not always the easiest thing to cover a lot of physical ground on campus. Okay, so here we have, these are all the buildings that facilities either already has on their docket of things to take care of. There is funding for that, and we know that there's funding to fix all the other door buttons as well. It's just a matter of making it the information available of what needs to be fixed and where the most urgent need is. So we have about a half a dozen buildings that are functional, consistent, a handful that either aren't consistently working or there's a few that aren't working, and then some where there's none at all, no functionality at all. And this is only a small portion of the work that we hope to complete by the end of the year. So one of the things that I'll do tonight is send out that link for that self-reporting so that if you are on campus and you're like, hey, that button didn't work, somebody might want to know about that. Somebody who's putting together lengthy 40-page reports on this sort of thing, that would save us a ton of time and work. And you all are leaders on campus and meet a lot more spaces than just those of us who are working on this project. Okay, so we went through, what we're gonna present tonight is only a handful of our recommendations. I'm gonna hand this off to Sammy and then we'll start, no, sorry, Alexander, and then we'll switch off. But on that report, you get a whole lot more detailed recommendations from many students and members of the Accessibility Caucus.
All right, so these recommendations, as Madeline said, a lot of these are from the Accessibility Caucus as a whole, and some of them are individual recommendations. So for recommendation 1, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. For recommendation 1, we recommend the creation of programs and events within ASCSU that would allow students to have a voice within the accessibility at ASCSU. Some events of these could be town hall meetings and things of such. And then recommendation number 2 is that all relevant ASCSU branches and departments develop a relationship with facilities management in order to continue the completion of ADA upgrades. So we are calling upon ASCSU as a whole to work together with us as a caucus to ensure facilities management is doing the things they have promised us as students that they are in charge of. And then for recommendation number 3, we recommend that Housing and Dining Services, in conjunction with Facilities Management, conduct a thorough ADA inspection of residential halls and dining halls and present those findings to the ASCSU Executive Cabinet and the Senate. Currently, as it stands, there are a lot of issues within our residential housing and dining halls when it comes to accessibility. Some of these that have been mentioned are the lack of allergy-friendly foods and the lack of allergen-related items within dining halls, as well as the lack of accessibility to enter certain dorms, and the importance that stands for a lot of freshman disabled students and disabled students as a whole that want to stay on campus. And then for recommendation number 4, the caucus recommends that facilities management, in conjunction with IT, establish a website where door buttons, elevators, and other tangible amenities be listed by building, their location, and accurate status on those amenities. So essentially, we're asking facilities management and IT to work together to take our findings and data that they have to make a website for students to see this data and to be able to report door buttons and elevator outages easier than the way it's set up right now.
Okay, our recommendation 5, I'm just gonna read this in full. I don't have all these recommendations memorized, and you guys have even more in-depth information on that report. So the caucus recommends that further communications with facilities management, HDS, Housing and Dining Services, and the Laurie Student Center to implement accessible buttons for all the gender neutral bathrooms. We find that there's a lot of intersectionality between those who are either non-gender conforming, non-binary, trans, etc., with the disability community. There's a lot of overlap there. And to give a voice to one and not the other, or where there's overlap, is a huge disservice. So we encourage all of our entities on campus to work together to make sure that all gender restrooms are also ADA compliant. Oh yeah, that's helpful. Sorry. Okay. There's also a recommendation for facilities management, housing and dining, and the LSC to implement and ensure EpiPen installation all around campus, and further AED installation. Well, those products to be available all around campus, not just in areas where we have larger crowds, but also within housing and dining and everywhere on campus. Let's see. I don't know what it's easier. Yes. We also recommend further communication with housing and dining regarding residential student employees' access to accessible rooms and accommodations. Currently, as it stands, if you are a student who has applied to be a residence hall, residence assistant, and you require accommodations, and there are no residence hall employee dormitories available. They're ADA compliant for students with disabilities. So essentially, if you're a student with a disability, you are denied the job, which is essentially employment discrimination, and not because it's like we don't want to hire you because you're disabled. It's a lack of resources, and that's a silly thing to have to face when it comes to discrimination.
So over the past year, the caucus's trajectory has been shaped by a lot of things. And currently our next step is to be shaped by several key elements such as sustained advocacy, an expanded scope of initiatives, community engagement, collaborative partnerships, transparency and accountability, continued data collection, institutional integration, student involvement, legislative advocacy, and educational initiatives. I would love to see all of your bright and shining faces at caucus on Mondays, so we can hear from you guys about what you guys want to see from our caucus, how we can ensure this space is accessible and accommodating for all, and how we can further the student population's idea of accessibility. Awesome.
Point of information real quick. What time is the accessibility caucus held on Mondays?
Mondays 4 to 5 in the conference room. And then just to conclude again, while the work of the Accessibility Caucus will continue past its initial timeline, it is essential to note that accessibility, efficacy, inclusive access, and upholding our accommodation guidelines does not fully fall solely on the shoulders of the Accessibility Caucus, the SDC Senate delegation, but every single member of ASCSU who has sworn an oath to office. So yeah, we'll take any questions about general stuff within the report, just to kind of help give grace there, or just about the presentation, whichever is easiest for folks.
Also, I'm part of a social work communities course that's doing a needs assessment to figure out what else we could be doing to be advocates for the disability community. Some other things that have been talked about that we should be keeping on our radar is the replacing of bricks that are uneven and broken on campus. We talked a little bit about specifically the relationship with employment and housing and dining. That's another thing that comes up all the time. What kind of accountability there is for professors who just refuse to meet accommodations or can't understand that the SPC is, working their hardest and doing their best, but could use more resources while students are waiting to have those appointments. And none of these issues are shrinking away at any rapid pace. So there's a lot of work to be done. And we know that door buttons are not the only thing, but it's something that we can tangibly do and collect data on to start to make that change. So we know that this isn't the only thing, and we're working on figuring out what else there is and what else we can do.
If there's any questions, we'll just start with the first raised placard and move on.
Awesome. We'll see y'all in a little bit.
And now we move on to executive reports. Let the executive cabinet get to it at this time.
Hi, everybody. I want to start this off by saying Happy Valentine's Day, and I don't mean to rain on anyone's parade, but the news I have to report isn't the most enlightening or hopeful. If any of you were here last week, I wasn't here. I was at the Board of Governors meeting in Pueblo. That's one of my responsibilities as president, is to serve as the student rep on that governing board for the entire CSU system. And over the course of the last few months, since the governor has proposed his budget, there have been some reworks of different scenarios that could be possible for our institution. And there are 3 separate scenarios that have been proposed. It's also important, before I really dig into this, that there are underlying mandatory costs that have to be paid. Across all of these scenarios include a 1% salary increase for faculty. But what's also included in all these scenarios is a mandatory 3% increase for state classified employees. Now that is a result of something called the Co-Wins Agreement. It's a collective bargaining agreement that was negotiated last year that essentially mandates all state classified employees get a 3% salary increase every single year. Now, the bad part about this is that all of the other departments provided funding, the state provided funding for all those other departments and their state classified employees to have that 3% increase. The only department they didn't provide that money to was the Department of Higher Education. And so it's the responsibility of the institutions to meet those needs and increase the salaries for the state classified folks. the money to do that just isn't there. Colorado still ranks 49th in the nation for state investment in higher education. And over the course of the last 30, 40 years, the share of what we would pay was about 20% in tuition. The state would cover 80%. Those numbers have flipped. And so we cover 80% of our tuition essentially. The state invests very, very little. And so all of that to lead up to say there are three scenarios. Scenario one, probably the worst possible scenario, includes a 2% tuition increase for resident undergrads, a 3% increase for non-resident undergrads. Even with all of that, it's still, and to mention a 3.5% number of state investment, that would leave our institution $20 million in a budget shortfall in debt. Scenario two, a 4% resident tuition increase, 4% non-resident tuition increase. That still sends us into, with 6% state investment, that still sends us into $11 million of a budget shortfall in debt. Scenario three, the best case scenario, this was crafted by institutional leaders across the state who said, look, if the governor wants to cap in-state tuition at 2% and keep it that way, here is the amount of state investment we would need in order to stay afloat, simply stay afloat. That scenario three, 2% for residents, 3% increase for non-residents. That's with 11% state investment. Even with all of that, it still sends the CSU Fort Collins campus $6 million into a budget shortfall. All of that to say, I don't really have any answers for you. No one has any answers for you other than Colorado gives the middle finger to higher education, and that has to stop. It might be somewhat sustainable to increase tuition for the next 2 or 3 years, but what happens in 5, 6, 7 years when we've reached our Tabor cap and there's no more available funds to put into higher education? That's what I'm concerned about. And so we really just need to keep the pressure on the state and make sure that this is a priority, because it will price our most vulnerable communities out of higher education. And I'm not willing to let that happen. So sorry for the depressing news on your Valentine's Day, but these messages have to be conveyed so that you have updates about what's going on and why your tuition is being raised. It's pretty informal, but if there are any questions that I can answer, I could do that right now.
So you'd mentioned I can't remember the exact verbiage, but a state employee. What exactly kind of is that? I'm curious.
It's strange. It's the classification for certain employees. They're called state classified employees. I don't really understand the difference between, how they distinguish faculty, state classified employees, but I would imagine our portion of state classified employees on campus is minimal compared to larger faculty and staff. I don't know. There are probably some folks in the back, Dr. Hughes, who probably knows more about state classified employees than I do. But that's about the extent of my information. The state classified portion is small, but it's still enough to make it an impact on the budget. Another wrench that gets thrown into this is that if state classified employees get a 3% increase every single year, then all the other employees of CSU say, well, why am I not seeing that? Why do I not get an increase? And so it's difficult balancing making sure that we're competitive and that we can pay faculty at a competitive rate so that we can attract talent and keep talent here, but also balancing that with tuition. I mean, it's difficult. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I guess kind of a follow-up to that would be, so you said in the best case scenario, we're looking at being in a $6 million budget shortfall. has this been a problem in the past? And if not, why is this a problem this year? Why all of a sudden are we looking at such a steep budget shortfall?
Yeah, it has been a problem in the past. The last time it came up in a major way was COVID. There were, I think, tens of millions of dollars in budget shortfall that we dealt with because of COVID. And slowly from then till now, we've been somewhat crawling out of that. I think a small portion of it still exists. So there's that, coupled with the rising cost of inflation, the cost of materials. And we also have another bond payment for the vet hospital, the vet teaching hospital as well. That's going to be to the tune of, I think, $5 to $6 million every single year.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Speaker, I yield the rest of my time.
So I know these are conversations we've had every year except for those. Last year we had a tuition increase, which it sounds like that's going to be the idea that they have. And I believe there's also a tuition increase the year before that too. So you may not have an answer to this question, so understood. Is there anything that LSAB has considered in terms of maybe not for this year, but advocating for years future to kind of start building up the pressure for there to be more funding at the state level?
Good question. I'll say the first part, what we've realized is that you can go to the Board of Governors until you're blue in the face. They just don't have the resources. It's the state. The state's the problem. And so that's why we've been really intentional about setting up meetings with members of the Joint Budget Committee, because ultimately it's kind of not up to the governor. It's kind of up to the Joint Budget Committee what numbers they come up with and what they decide. And so I think the absence of student leaders actually doing that work is why, I mean, it's gone up every year, and it's kind of it's a no-brainer essentially to raise tuition, because if there aren't students physically telling legislators student stories about how this impacts us, they won't hear it. The CSU system lobbyists are respectfully more concerned with the big capital development projects, getting funding for that, increasing faculty compensation, because they're deathly afraid of the unions. And they know that if you come here as a freshman, the likelihood of you leaving is very slim. So they'll raise tuition as much as they need to stay afloat. Doesn't really answer your question, but in terms of the tuition increases that have happened over the last few years, the only time there was reprieve was during COVID, and that was very intentional. It still sent us into some of that bond debt. But even prior to COVID, tuition had gone up year over year. It's increased $6,000 artificially in the last 10 years. It's just where we're at in Colorado, unfortunately.
And then kind of more of, not necessarily a question, but kind of a question. I know ASCSU has done a lot in terms of lobbyists. We got lobbyists, and ELSA has been really engaged this year. Are there plans to help lead the initiative statewide so that we can reach out to other student governments across the state, you know, smaller ones, big ones, et cetera? Is there any current plan, or is that something that's like, oh, that's a really cool idea, that's something we can do? Is that something to kind of help? Because I know ASCSU, we have only so much, right? We can only do so much. So help seeing if we could build that coalition. Is that something that y'all would be interested in?
That's a good segue into what I'm doing tomorrow, actually. We are having the Colorado Student Government Coalition Day at the Capitol. So student body presidents and vice presidents from institutions across the state, Mines, Ames, we even have some community colleges there, UCCS, CSU Pueblo. We're all going to be there meeting with the state treasurer, the speaker of the House, hopefully a few members of the Joint Budget Committee, to try to tackle these issues as a collective, because I mean, we can only do so much as ASCSU, and we're kind of leading the effort, but we need help, and we need other folks to reinforce that narrative. We also have a meeting with Representative Rittenell, who's leading the charge on the occupancy bill that would ban U+2. And there are a number of institutions in college towns who have occupancy limits outside of Fort Collins. And so we're also going to utilize that time to advocate a united front on those issues as well.
Awesome, thank you for the update. I yield.
Thank you, Chair Christie. All right, hi. So my question is, well, first of all, I think that one of the effective ways to help tackle this is also kind of the other side of what Chair Trout was saying. And that is like really going into the student body and making sure they understand what's happening. Do you have any plans or are there any ideas so far about how to really get the student body to understand what's happening and involved in this?
We're in the process of planning, I don't know if we're gonna call it a budget town hall or a budget listening session, but we want to get President Parsons there, Vice President Hanlon, maybe Angie Nielsen, to explain the budget to students and just give the overview of why we're in the situation where we're in right now, and give students an opportunity to tell their stories as well about how these costs are affecting us. I mean, we're all feeling it. And I set up the coalition day at the Capitol for tomorrow, and I had a Google form of questions they wanted to ask the Department of Higher Education. The vast majority of them are either about affordability or mental health. And so these are issues not only that we're facing, but statewide. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Associate Campbell. I just wanted to speak to a little, answer a couple of like Senator Cole Johnson, right? A couple of the questions there. Some of the struggles that we have with budget deficits every year is because the way that we tax residential and commercial taxes in the state of Colorado, if one goes down and the other rises, we go with a lower amount. It's a really complicated piece of legislation, but if there's any way y'all want to take some time out of your own personal time to learn about the Tabor Act, it has really serious implications for higher education, where colleges can't even meet the same budget that they had a previous year, not asking for any increase and still wind up in a deficit, which is where we've been, which is where pretty much every higher institution in the state of Colorado has been. So while, like, for example, while the oil and gas industry starts to dwindle, but our residential taxes are going through the roof because the cost of living keeps going up and up and up, we're not seeing that being collected. It's being given back to the community, and it's not going towards our state funded programs. We also just don't fund higher education the way it should be. And then to speak to the classified employees, I think it has to do a lot with how, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows, I just see this, the way this works at a school district level as well as in higher ed. When you have faculty, they're contracted differently with the way that their salary and pay is versus like hourly employees that are essential to the daily function. And so it's just classified a little bit differently. And then you have, of course, the university like student employees, which are also classified in a different way, et cetera. And so I hope that provides some clarification. Yeah, that's all that I really have. I don't have any questions. It sucks. I yield.
Any other questions?
Just lastly, Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights was instituted to restrict the power of government and the ability of government to grow. And it's doing exactly what it's been intended to do. But it leads to dire consequences for a lot of vital social programs and funding for things like higher education. So thank you everyone for indulging me. I know that was longer than usual, but things that need to be communicated.
Next, we have judicial reports.
Hi everyone, I am Deputy Chief Justice Jamie Binder. Elena, or Chief Justice Truxell, cannot be here today. She's very sick. So I'm going to be delivering our opinion and then saying some words on her behalf. So this is opinion number 5302. It was A couple of questions submitted on the,
Sorry, point of, personal privilege. The rule is that, because I know that you're not allowed to really send it early, but would you send it now, so that way we can see it as you're reading it?
is that acceptable since it wasn't in the email?
Yes,
48
because
hours?
you're reading it in full anyway.
Okay.
You're reading it. It's written in state accessibility guidelines, but that's, because this was the only year.
Parliamentary account,
What?
ASCSU parliamentary should pop up.
I might be able to forward it to you faster.
I got it, thank you though. Okay, this question was clarification on allowance of Senate changing the elections code. The following questions were submitted for clarification. Does Senate have the power to change the ASCSU referendum elections code? Is a petition required that must be approved by the elections manager? If Bill 5315 fiscally and otherwise accessible elections is passed, will it need to be ratified in the spring? And are there any special rules for amending the elections code other than those regarding time? The ASCSU Supreme Court has determined the following. In a 7-0 vote, the court found that the Senate or any senator with the endorsement of the elections manager may amend the ASCSU referendum elections code. The Constitution states in section 806, referenda and code C, subsection C, the ASCSU referendum and elections code may only be amended by a Senate bill specifically delineating all proposed amendments. B, precedent illustrates in Senate Bill 3115, proposing an amendment to the ASCSU election rules with the endorsement of the presiding elections manager. This shows that while the Senate does have the ability to introduce amendments in the form of a bill, the endorsement of the elections manager is required. C, it is the opinion of the court that while the Senate does have the power to amend the ASCSU referendum and elections code, they cannot subvert the input of the elections manager relating to any changes to the code. Question 2, in a 7-0 vote, the court found that a petition process is only required if the process outlined above is circumvented. This petition process is outlined in section 3 and 4 of the ASCSU referendum and elections code. Question 3, in a 7-0 vote, the court found that no, if Bill 5315 fiscally and otherwise accessible elections is passed, it will not need to be re-ratified in the spring. In this decision, the court looked to the Constitution section 806D. The ASCSU referendum and elections code shall remain in effect at all times and shall not require yearly readoption. Question 4, in a 7-0 vote, the court found that subsections D through K of section 806 of the Constitution are the sole rules outlined in the Constitution regarding amending the ASCSU referendum and elections code. All other rules regarding changing the code can be found outlined in the ASCSU referendum and elections code. So this is the opinion in full. It can be sent out in next week's weekly email, and it will also be put up on the website. Elena did want me to just say a few words about this opinion because, to be honest, this was a really, really hard one. Some of my justices are here and they can attest to the fact that it took us a really long time, definitely complicated and something that we haven't seen a lot of before. So this is just from Chief Justice Drexel.
This opinion is not a limit on Senate powers at all. But we kind of let it go unnoticed that the elections are run by an impartial third body, and that's why the election process is set up the way that it is. It's also important to note that oftentimes senators are elected and they are impacted or benefit by the elections process. So this decision came with the intent of upholding our ethics and transparency. As the decision applies, senators can definitely contribute to amending the code via bill, but proper procedure must be followed. We were also not necessarily thinking about the bill that many of you have maybe seen, Bill 5315. We did get a specific question on that bill. I believe it was question 3. We only looked at that bill in the circumstances of that bill for the question number 3. This decision in whole is our attempt to encourage collaboration and cooperation between senators and the elections manager. At the end of the day, the elections manager has been studying this code for months, and it's what they have been studying since they got hired. So without their input or their knowledge on what they're supposed to be enforcing, it just seems a little bit unethical. We want to encourage collaboration, and we also want to set up our elections manager for success so that they run the elections process correctly, or else one thing falls, everything could fall, and that would be really detrimental. So just our input on that. If you have any other questions about it, I would suggest talking to Chief Justice Truxell next week. She's really sick, so she's out this week. And the other, I believe, 2 opinion requests that we have pending, you will hear next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we move on to legislative reports. Any officers?
Just a reminder to please go to committees. The attendance has been really low. And so after this week, if you do not go to committees, unfortunately, you're going to have to start sending out strikes because it's like part of your job description. So everyone has to go to 1 committee per week. So Parliamentarian Doyle has put the committee times up on there. So if you need to take a picture, I'm also going to send it in the weekly email. I sent it to the front desk, so it should be in the weekly email for next week. I also sent it out in the Teams. But if you can't make it to any of the committees, just reach out to me and we can find like an alternative option. And so you can still get your committee hours. I've not given out strikes, but kind of getting to that point. And then if you ever can't make it to a Senate session, just email me and then I can excuse you. But just make sure you're telling me in advance, just because I'm seeing low attendance today. I'm just saying that, but I'll send like another announcement out for the Teams. But I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Right, I'll talk a little bit. Just a reminder, I thought elections was gonna do this, but tomorrow we do have ranked choice voting happening in here from 12 to 1:30. They said they're hoping to have pizza. So I would say come if you have the chance. Because they do need attendance in order for us to test out ranked choice voting for this upcoming election. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the RA reached back out to me and told me that RHA completely denied their bill, their entire bill. Didn't give them any sort of funding. She sent this really long email, very detailed. And I was just saying, it's just mostly saying that she didn't understand why. She kept it under the max limit per student that she needed to be. That RHA really does push RAs to only go to RHA for funding, and for them to tell her about 28 days that RHA was losing funding before she presented her bill. And then in 8 days, she said she talked over to 7 campus clubs, organizations, and departments to find funds for this event. I met and emailed with numerous potential financial supporters in order to get paid for and successful, ASCSU Community Council and Allison's personal budget were all willing to give money for this event. And it was mostly her just saying how disappointed she was in RHA. And so with that, I will be pulling my bill that kind of just got discharged from all committees. Thank you, chairs, for looking over it, but we will not be looking at it any longer. Continuing on, I don't think I have anything else to say. With that, we're gonna move on to committee abstracts. Chair Taylor.
Just like it was mentioned, please come to committees. We meet Mondays 12 to 1. If you would like to be added to the Teams channel that we have, please let me know and I can add you to that. But that's all I have.
Chair Trout.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna hear me talking a lot today, not on this specifically. Next week, we will be going over the caucus bylaws. So if you're interested in bylaws and want to know about procedure, come to caucus, or if you want to be involved in the conversation for the bylaws for the caucus, please let me know. That's all I have, which is the shortest committee abstract I've given. So that is
Thank you, Chairperson.
All right, so I finally decided on the time for Women's Caucus. It's going to be Tuesdays from 6 to 7. That's pretty much all I got. I didn't hold it this week because I was at Sweet Shop yesterday. So we are going to be starting a book drive for next month to help with the social justice library. My mind totally blanked. Sorry. Yeah, please come. Oh, it is being held in the conference room. You'll know.
Thank you. Any other committees that to give an abstract? Seeing none, I think we're going to Senator and Associate reports. Senator Davis.
Hi, I have a bit of a long one because I'm covering two things. So, happy Valentine's Day, by the way. In terms of SFRB, Alice couldn't be here tonight, so I'm giving the report. But last week we looked over ALVS and athletics. ALVS was super quick, super easy, because they didn't ask for any sort of increase. So that was super awesome. Athletics, we are still discussing. We're going to come to a conclusion on Monday and we will vote. But we are discussing because they did propose an increase. So we are discussing that and really just hashing all of that out. And so we will vote on that on Monday. We've also been doing a lot of tabling. So last week we tabled for 2 days and we have a survey that we've been sending out to students regarding every fee area per week. So last week it was athletics and ALVS. And basically it's just like, do you know where your student fees are going? This fee area did propose an increase or they didn't. Do you agree with that? Or do you want to see anything added to them? Do you want them to ask for an increase or anything? And so we got over 50 responses. And so we ended up giving a lot of information, a lot of clarification because people don't really know where their fees are going. So that was really cool. And we will continue tabling for the rest of the semester, hopefully. And so look for us on the plaza. I want to say it's Mondays and Tuesdays, but I will confirm or have someone else confirm. And then in terms of WGIC, it is Valentine's Day. And so that's a really big holiday for a lot of people. The Victim Assistance Hotline is open 24/7, 365. And so I will put out a little screenshot of the phone number for that, just as a general thing. On the 21st, which is a week from today, we're doing love letters to survivors in LSC 226 from 10 to 2. So come write love letters to survivors and have a good Valentine's Day for you.
Thank you, Associate Camber.
Okay, I got a lot for y'all. So LSAB is going to be voting on Friday to take stances on a couple different bills. I will post the links, probably not tonight because the rest of my evening I am otherwise engaged, but I will probably first thing in the morning. The first one is allowing House Bill 241070, allowing certain items at school graduation. It's a bill that allows preschool, public school, public university students to wear or display religious or cultural regalia at a graduation ceremony. It prohibits preschool, school, public college, or university from restricting what a student may wear under required graduation attire. And then allows the preschool, school, or public college, or university to prohibit a student wearing or displaying an item that is likely to cause a substantial disruption of or material interference with the graduation ceremony. The kind of point about this is I think it was a story that reached national news that a young man was displaying, it was not regalia given by the university to represent his tribe and was banned from his graduation. This is sort of in response to that, but it's House Bill 24-1070. I'll post the links. You can look it over. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think as that pertains to college students, and we will be taking a stance as a university as we hired lobbyists to do that for us. The other piece of legislation that we're going to be taking a stance on is prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive places, or sensitive spaces, excuse me. It prohibits a person from carrying a firearm openly and concealed in public locations specified. It delineates some fines, exceptions for law enforcement, members of the armed forces, National Guard, security personnel, firearms stored in vehicles, blah, 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 nowhere near ballot drop boxes. And then the locations are things like parks, schools, libraries, etc. My explaining it right now is not all encompassing for the entire piece of legislation. So again, that's Senate Bill 24-131. I'll post links. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Really, you can reach out to me. I'll put them out there, or any member of LSAB. Hopefully they would ethically read your opinion so we can all have a good discussion. If you're worried about that, just send it to me. I'll make sure your voice is heard. We're having a lot of different conversations in ALVS because we have student parents, but we also have veterans in that space. So there's lots to consider, not just our own personal opinions. So we'd love to hear more. ALVS has some things going on. The Wednesdays, Bridges, Conversation Spaces, I'll send a link out to that. We have a bunch of different, there's a collaboration with El Centro. We have a bunch of different dates coming up. We're also doing tabletop gaming here in the LSC and D&D on different dates. I'll share that as well. Lots of really good stuff. Yep, yep, Nerdsy Night. Okay, and then the next big thing, we talked a little bit about accessibility. We are working to collaborate to revamp what kind of legislation we would like to see that codifies accommodations. We're going to revamp the accessibility Lex, but we're going to get a whole lot more input. So if you want to be added to the Teams channel that was created, we're calling it the Unified Accessibility Project. We're going to go through what doesn't work for people and get it to where it needs to be. So we really want everyone who wants to be involved in that or had an opinion to be a part of that process. And I think that we're on the verge of doing something really great in this space and bringing this entire organization together. So let me know. I think that's all I have. I yield.
Thank you. Next, we have Chair Brisky. Okay, I just wanted to also give a little update about Sweet Shop yesterday because we just had that last night. We had a great turnout in the booth that Senator Davis and I had, along with Alex Silverheart. We gave away 200 Plan Bs and a whole bag and more of free pregnancy tests. So that all is in conjunction with what Alex is currently working on with the vending machines. And so there's lots of fun opportunities and yeah, so thank you. And I was so glad to see some people there last night from Summit. So thank you. I yield my time. Thank you. Senator Bowman.
Hey everyone, happy Valentine's Day and happy Black History Month. All right, so the back office continuing with its theme of Black Destiny and redesigning our future. We are continuing with more and more and more events for you guys to come to. So, what's the excuse not to go to any, right? So our next event category is ballroom. which will be tomorrow, 4 to 6 p.m., continuing into Friday. So, you can't miss it. Thursday, Friday, you just pick whichever day for you, right? Right? Okay, so we have those. Then we have our weekly Real Talk sessions. Our next one will be next week, Tuesday, which will lead into the themes of gender and race. We will also be collaborating with the Pride Office. Yay! Okay, so we have that, and then the following week, the topic will be reparations. All right, so I hope I see you guys there. Yay! Okay.
Thank you. Chair Trout?
Hi, y'all. Just want to let folks know a couple things. One, I want to give a huge shout out to ASCSU for volunteering for the last 2 weekends for Ram Ride. Y'all were you absolutely came out in droves for that. So thank you for the folks who were able to come out. Huge shout out to the folks who were able to come in the 2 weekends in a row, because that's a lot, even for people who get paid to be there. So huge shout out to y'all. Another thing, an update specifically with the SDC, we are getting closer to having a full staff in terms of accommodation specialists. So the problem that we had last year of folks waiting a long time to get their accommodations, we're not seeing that same problem this semester. Folks are getting back within the same week, some the same day. So if you need accommodations, this is the perfect time to request them with the SDC. And if you know folks who were hesitant last semester to get one, please have them get an accommodation. Accommodation does not hurt anybody, even if your professor is ableist and they say no. That is your legal right to get an accommodation. So please get one if you need one. The SDC is here and ready to support y'all. And we in the delegation are ready to support folks as well if folks need help through that process. So thank you for that. And with that, I yield.
Thank you. Chair Kelly?
Cool. College of Natural Sciences, College Council specifically is going to start looking over tech fees. So yeah, if you have taken a chemistry lab, biology lab, and you're using crappy equipment or something, let me know or attend the meetings, and I can certainly bring that up and get new stuff because we have the money. Let's spend it. All right, for you.
Thank you. Parliamentarian?
So I just have a question about that book drop. What sort of books are you looking for?
So for the social justice library, we're looking for books that either pertain to social justice. We're also looking at banned books too. So those are the main ones. So definitely also going to professors when they do their clean outs and stuff like that. We're gonna create a flyer and have more information about that. So next Senate session, I will have way more information.
I yield.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we move on to conference business. Can the parliamentarian please put 2 hours on the conference clock? We are not going to do the ratification because it's not happening today. So we're going to start with old business, resolution 5303, the accessibility report.
Hi, it's me again. If folks within the Accessibility Caucus, doesn't matter how long you've been within the caucus, if you would like to come up as well, just to have your pretty faces be appreciated. If you don't want to do that, that's okay too. I think he promises more than 3 of us. As well. Okay. Beautiful. I'm gonna really start off by reading a statement from our Chair Emeritus, Rory Lowe. Unfortunately, they could not be here physically tonight, so I'm giving their statement on their behalf. Hello, everyone. My name is Rory Lowe. I am a CSU alumni, Senator Emeritus for the Student Disability Center, former Accessibility Officer for the DI Affairs Committee, co-founder of the Accessibility Caucus, and Chair Emeritus of the Accessibility Caucus. I am deeply regretful I cannot be here in person for the presentation of the Accessibility Caucus report. I've been in many roles for this caucus, and I'm saddened that the death of a family member is keeping me from being present tonight. So I hope you will all accept this message read on my behalf. First, I want to begin with an immense and deep thank you. I'm deeply grateful to Sammy Trout, who has been by my side through this entire project, not just as a colleague, but as a best friend who has been my voice of reason and challenged me to grow in new and unexpected ways. I'm also deeply grateful to my co-senator, Ariadne Athey, who has always been a sounding board for ideas and whose fire inspired me to create this caucus. I also want to thank my fellow activists, Ali, Adrian, Sarah, Leary, and Mia, who have been deeply involved with this caucus and disability activism on the CSU campus. I also want to thank all the people who served and continue to serve the Adult Learner and Veteran Services Office. Y'all have always been unwavering in your commitment to the work of inclusivity. And lastly, I want to thank Director Justin Dove and Assistant Director Joe Turner, who brought me on and gave me the chance to drive this kind of change for disabled people who attend, work, and live on this campus. None of this would be possible without any of you. When I joined ASCSU, I joined because I wanted to make this campus more accessible for disabled people. I didn't just want us to be included, I wanted us to be valued, not in spite of our disabilities, but because of them. Disability is complex and touches every aspect of an individual's life. It determines educational, and professional opportunities, interpersonal relationships, housing, and who gets to be part of their community. I wanted to make sure that the Accessibility Caucus was done the right way through collaboration, dialogue, and with the input of so many voices as possible. What started as a way to open doors for this community has turned into so much more. The Accessibility Caucus is more than a caucus, it is a true community, and I hope that this caucus will leave a legacy of inclusion, compassion, and education. Disability is an uncomfortable subject to talk about, as it is something profoundly personal, often painful, messy on every level, and unfortunately, usually considered an afterthought. The Americans with Disabilities Act is one of the most complicated pieces of civil rights legislation, and unfortunately, it has left many Black, Indigenous, and LGBTQ+ communities behind. I can also recognize the immense privilege of having these words read aloud to you today in this room as a member of the ADA generation. Had I been born just 9 years earlier, my life and the life of every person with a disability born after 1990 in this room would be extremely different. It is important to name and recognize these painful legacies of forced sterilization, criminalization of our presence in public with ugly laws, forced institutionalization, psychiatric surgeries like lobotomies, in extreme cases, ongoing mass murder of disabled people by authoritarian governments and imperialist regimes. While the ASCSU Accessibility Caucus cannot change these deep historical and ongoing traumas overnight, it is a step in the right direction. Right now, everyone in this room, you have the ability to be the change. There are many choices to be made, and arguably a pretty important one is what to do with these traumatic legacies. I believe very deeply that everyone in this room cares about inclusion. I believe it has been proven to me time and time again without fail. Change truly begins at a grassroots level, right here, right now, with us. It begins not only by asking questions, but providing honest and compassionate answers to questions that on the surface might seem ill-intended. No one is born knowing everything. I certainly was not born an activist. I had to learn it often through trial and error and sticking my own foot in my mouth. The important thing is a willingness to engage in difficult conversations and to ask and likewise answer the hard questions. There is no way to make change and to make space for all disabled people. So I want to leave everyone with some hard questions. What are you going to do? Are you going to do anything? And if you choose not to, who is your silence serving? As always, thank you for listening and for showing up. Your voice matters now more than ever. And for the last time, thank you. In community, we're love. And with that, we are willing to take any questions folks may have. Then other things, then discussion debate. Thank you.
We'll start with discussion debate with the first choice. Senator Davis.
This is actually a question. Can you like go over therefore be here by that one? I just don't really understand what it's doing.
Which one are we looking at?
The first one.
The first one. So essentially, it's the Senate essentially agreeing with the caucus report and saying we stand behind this as a entity, not just as an individual group.
That was, I was just confused. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else? wishes to speak at this time? Okay, moving on, we will enter a period of voting.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to approve this resolution with unanimous consent.
Is there any dissent? Seeing none, this resolution is approved with unanimous consent. Moving on, we have resolution 5304, the housing resolution.
Because it was just, oh wait, they were supposed to expedite it. They didn't actually say to expedite it. We didn't vote on that, but. Yeah.
Okay, so, the,
Now that I know of. So if you want to do a quick summary, and then we'll move into discussion, debate, and voting.
Okay, hello again. So the purpose of the housing resolution is to create, is to create, is to both, is both, is to both, show support that and to both show support that we are demanding that the administration take the issue of take the issue of houselessness at CSU more seriously, and to create a board to help address this issue on at more of a off-campus perspective by doing things like working with apartment groups off campus to ensure both to ensure both cheaper and emergency housing for CSU students. As previously stated, while this bill is incredibly similar to the one that established the housing caucus, the housing caucus focuses more on campus, while this will focus more off campus in order to not end up with one caucus having to with one group like the housing caucus having to take the daunting task of dealing with all of the houselessness issues combined together. Any questions?
So, only moving into a period of discussion debate. First was preference for Taylor.
This is just, so the first of the therefore clauses, can you add the semicolon and comma? I noticed that, and I thought that should be added. So if you, with author's rights, would like to make that edit, that would be awesome.
Do you accept that?
Yes, I accept that.
And if we could check, I think it's on most of them, but if we just check those, that would be awesome. And then I do.
Those will be changed before the fiscal version is printed out. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak during this time? Seeing none. Oh. Somebody.
Okay, I just want to say that I know that we have another housing campus, or kind of, but at the same time, what is the harm, even if they were literally the exact same, what is the harm in having multiple? Because that's a referral question, not like I'm in discussion with it. What's the harm in having multiple? Because it's not like the two meetings can be scheduled over each other or over any other kind of meeting. It's not possible really for another housing caucus to take away from anything. All it can possibly do is either do nothing, which I don't expect us to do, or help someone. This also has Michael Bertram involved, which gives me a lot of hope that it will do a lot because he is awesome. So I will be voting yes. I yield.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chair Christie.
Hi, so first of all, I think this addresses a really important issue. It's super important. I'm just wondering if you have talked at all to the Housing Caucus and if there's been any discussion of like collaborating, anything along that line.
Yes, I have spoken I've spoken, this was, the introduction and planning for this bill happened around the same time Chair Taylor was introducing his bill, but I've talked to him about the bill and about how the two groups can work together, and I will be talking to the chair of the new housing caucus to see how our two groups can interact and collaborate.
Sweet, thank you so much. I yield my time.
Chair Kelly.
Sweet pin, I just wanted to say that. And I would also like to motion the previous question.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
We'll be moving into a period of voting.
Motion for unanimous consent.
Is there any dissent to that motion? Hearing none, we pass this with unanimous consent. And with that, we move into ending roll calls. Senator Davis.
Motion to use beginning roll call as ending roll call and leave room for additions.
Second.
Is there any dissent? Seeing none, we'll use beginning roll call as ending roll call. Committee reports, internal affairs. Moving on, budgetary affairs.
We discharged the budget reallocation bill as well as the RHA bill. The RHA bill is no longer on the list, but it's still 12-1 on Tuesdays. Thank you.
University affairs.
Yeah, we discharged the RHA, which doesn't matter anymore, and I can't remember the other one, but no change on anything we sent through anyways, so. Anyway.
DEI affairs. Caucus reports, women's caucus,
No, I don't have any.
accessibility caucus. Housing, it's not good. And with that, we adjourn. I'll see you next week.